Eiichiro Oda and Masashi Kishimoto are friends. They've drawn each other's characters for magazine covers. So here's the thing nobody wants to say out loud, because it might upset that friendship. One Piece is not a better story than Naruto. It's not close. And I'm not going to prove it with vibes. I'm proving it with the actual lore, chapter by chapter. Let's define terms first, because this is where every YouTube debate video fails. Best is subjective. Better story is not. A story is a structure: setup, escalation, theme, payoff. Naruto has one. It ran 700 chapters over 15 years, and it ended. One Piece is 1,187 chapters deep, 29 years running, currently mid-war in the Elbaf arc, and Oda has openly said he still doesn't know exactly when it wraps. You cannot fully judge the architecture of a house that's still being built. Kishimoto finished his house. That alone should terrify One Piece fans, but we're just getting started. Point 1. One Piece runs on a formula. Naruto runs on a web. Here's the pattern, and you know it even if you love the show. Straw Hats arrive at an island. They meet the local tyrant. Arlong enslaves Nami's village. Wapol terrorizes Drum Island. Crocodile is secretly sabotaging Alabasta. Enner rules Skypiea as a false god. Mariah steals shadows on Thriller Bark. Hody Jones oppresses Fishman Island, which is almost a direct repeat of Arlong. Doflamingo owns Dressrosa. Big Mom controls Whole Cake Island. Kaido crushes Wano. Every arc, a new self-contained despot, a flashback to explain him, a fight, and onward. It's a great formula. It's still a formula, and after 1,000 chapters, it's the same formula. Naruto doesn't work like that. Orochimaru shows up in the Chunin exams, and he's still relevant during the Sasuke retrieval arc. Still relevant when Sasuke kills him. Still relevant in the war arc when Sasuke resurrects him for information. Akatsuki isn't a villain of the weak gang. Itachi, Kisame, Deidara, Sasori, Pain, Obito, all recurring threats that thread through the entire back half of the manga toward one endgame. Naruto is built like a web where every arc pulls a thread that's still attached at the finale. One Piece is built like a chain of standalone boss fights that happen to share a cast. Point 2. Naruto's villains flip. One Piece's villains just die. This is the part that actually separates these two writers. Kishimoto's entire signature move is the moral inversion, the villain who turns out to have been the story's biggest hero the whole time. Itachi Uchiha slaughtered his entire clan in one night. For a decade, the fandom hated him alongside Sasuke. Then the truth. Konoha's own leadership ordered the massacre to prevent an Uchiha coup that would have triggered a civil war, and Itachi chose to commit the atrocity himself, spare his little brother, and live the rest of his life as a hated missing nin and Akatsuki double agent, silently protecting the village and Sasuke from the shadows until he let Sasuke kill him. That's not a sad backstory bolted onto a villain. That's a total rewrite of everything you thought the last 400 chapters meant. He's not alone. Nagato, the leader of Pain, grew up an orphan in war-torn Omegakure, raised on Jiraiya's belief that peace was possible, watched his best friend Yahiko sacrifice himself after Hanzo betrayed them, and warped that grief into peace through pain before Naruto talks him back from it and he dies undoing the damage he caused. Obito Uchiha was a kind, clumsy kid who watched Rin, the girl he loved, force Kakashi to kill her rather than let her be used as a living weapon against the Leaf. And that single moment turned him into Tobi, the man secretly orchestrating the Fourth Great Ninja War. Even Gaara, a would-be child assassin turned into a killer by his own village, gets a full redemption into Kazekage. Naruto's whole design philosophy is understand the villain and the story changes shape. Now go through One Piece's list. Doflamingo gets a genuinely tragic backstory, a former world noble who lost his family to mob violence after his father renounced their celestial status. Great material. But Doflamingo is still just a villain you're satisfied to watch Luffy beat. He doesn't retroactively become one of the story's secret good guys. Crocodile helps out once during the Marineford War and goes right back to being an antagonist. Big Mom is still an active threat with zero redemption arc. Kaido gets a tragic, nobody could ever kill me so I wanted to die motivation, and then Luffy just beats him and it's over. Sympathetic backstory is not the same tool as moral inversion. And Oda, for all 1,187 chapters, has never once pulled the Itachi move. One Piece explains its villains. Naruto recontextualizes its entire narrative through them. One more detail on Jiraiya, because it proves the point about load-bearing deaths. He doesn't just die fighting Pain's 6 bodies in Amegakure. With his last moments, he actually decodes the riddle of who's really behind Pain and smuggles that intelligence home through a coded message on a summoned toad. Fukasaku deciphers it, hands it to Naruto, and that exact piece of information is what lets Naruto end the Pain arc later. A side character's death is the plot mechanism, not just an emotional beat. Point 3. The side characters tell the same story. Take Neji Hyuga. Born into the Hyuga clan's branch family, forced to wear a caged bird seal that lets the main house execute him with a hand sign, raised to believe his fate was sealed at birth. A belief that curdles into real resentment toward his cousin Hinata, whose only crime was being born into the main house instead of the branch. His defining early moment is a brutal Chunin exam fight against Naruto, built entirely around whether a person can escape a fate handed to them, and losing that fight cracks his fatalism open for good. By the 4th Shinobi War, that same Neji throws himself in front of an attack meant for Hinata and Naruto and dies protecting the exact cousin he once despised, closing his arc as living proof of the show's central thesis. Pain doesn't have to become more pain. Now put that next to Usopp. He starts as comic relief, a compulsive liar covering for real cowardice, son of Yasopp, a sniper who left his family behind to sail with red-haired Shanks. His defining moment comes when Luffy decides to scrap the broken-down Going Merry for a new ship, and Usopp, refusing to let go of something the crew has outgrown, actually fights Luffy over it and quits the crew. He comes back later in a mask as Sogeking, so he doesn't have to admit weakness by rejoining outright. It's a genuinely great human beat about pride and grief. But notice the difference. Usopp's arc resolves itself and stays about Usopp. Neji's death is a plot-relevant answer to a question the entire series had been asking since Chapter 1. That's the gap between a good character moment and a load-bearing one. Point 4. Luffy hasn't changed. Naruto and Sasuke actually did. This is the one that gets people angry, so let's use receipts. Compare Sasuke Uchiha across the manga. A wounded kid obsessed with killing his brother, who abandons the village and his team for power under Orochimaru in the Sasuke retrieval arc, who learns the truth about Itachi and swings toward wanting to annihilate Konoha entirely, who nearly kills his own teammates, who fights a literal war against the shinobi world, and who only comes back from the edge after a final Valley of the End rematch with Naruto where they both lose an arm. That's a character who goes through actual permanent transformation. Ideology, relationships, morality, all of it rewritten multiple times over the course of the story. Now look at Luffy. In East Blue, Chapter 1, he wants to be Pirate King, values his crew above all else, and solves problems by punching them very hard while laughing. In the current Elbaf arc, 1,180 plus chapters and nearly 3 decades later, he wants to be Pirate King, values his crew above all else, and solves problems by punching them very hard while laughing, just now with a Gear 5 that turns him into a living cartoon god. Luffy is a phenomenal character. He's charismatic, he's funny, he anchors the found family theme better than almost anyone in shonen history. But he is not an arc. He's a constant. Oda has said himself Luffy was designed to never really change, and that's a legitimate creative choice, but it means One Piece's protagonist contributes 0 to the coming-of-age backbone that makes Naruto's story function as a story instead of a franchise. Point 5. Naruto has one theme. One Piece has a mood. Naruto's entire text, from the Zabuza and Haku arc in Chapter 19, all the way to the final fight with Sasuke, is obsessed with one question. Does pain and loneliness inevitably create more violence, or can it be broken? Haku kills for Zabuza because it's the only love he's ever known. Gaara kills because his own father tried to have him assassinated as a child. Itachi becomes a monster to protect the people who'll never know it. Nagato destroys a village trying to force the world into peace. Sasuke nearly ends civilization trying to avenge a brother he later learns was innocent. Every major antagonist in Naruto is a mirror of Naruto himself, an orphan who could have gone the same way. And the finale is literally built on Naruto breaking that cycle by choosing to understand Sasuke instead of just defeating him. That's an architecture. Every villain serves one through line. One Piece's themes: freedom, found family, chasing your dream, even when the world tells you you're powerless, are genuinely great and genuinely felt. But they're episodic. Robin's arc is about found family and belonging after Ohara's destruction. Sanji's arc is about found family and sacrifice after Zeph cut off his own leg to keep him alive. Nami's arc is about breaking free from Arlong's slavery. These are individually powerful, but they don't accumulate into a single, escalating thesis the way Naruto's arcs do. One Piece is a great theme repeated in 12 different keys. Naruto is one theme built like a skyscraper, floor by floor for 700 chapters straight. The fair part, because I told you I'd be honest. Naruto has real flaws, and I'm not pretending otherwise. Kaguya Otsutsuki, the final villain, is introduced with barely any setup, and is widely, fairly, criticized as an ass-pull that undercuts everything the Madara arc built up. Sakura Haruno's character growth stalls hard for most of the series compared to her two teammates. And yes, the anime is drowning in filler, but that's on the studio stretching content, not on Kishimoto's actual manga, which never has that problem. And One Piece deserves real credit. Oda's long con foreshadowing is genuinely the best in the genre. Robin's backstory tied to poneglyphs planted 100 chapters early, Sabo's survival, the Void Century mystery box. The scale of the world is unmatched. And because the story moves slower, the Straw Hat Crew's chemistry feels lived in a way few casts ever achieve. But move slower has a real cost, and the numbers back it up. The Whole Cake Island arc ran roughly 120 chapters to cover one tea party. Wano ran well over 140 chapters across more than 4 real-world years just to beat one emperor. That's not depth by default. Sometimes it's just distance. The knockout. But here's the problem with judging a story by its world building and its vibes. That's not what a story is. World building is content. Foreshadowing without payoff is a promise, not a resolution. 29 years in, One Piece still hasn't paid off the Void Century, still hasn't revealed what's really in Laugh Tale, still hasn't shown you the ending Oda claims he's had planned since the start. Kishimoto had a thesis about hatred and loneliness in Chapter 1, and he closed that thesis in Chapter 700 with Naruto and Sasuke bleeding out at the Valley of the End, finally understanding each other. That is a complete story. One Piece, as of the chapter that dropped this week, is still just a very, very good ongoing show. A story you can't finish isn't a better story, it's just a longer one. So go ahead, tell me in the comments why Ace's death hit harder than Jiraiya's. Tell me Gear 5 beats the entire Pain arc. I'll be there reading every single one of them, because unlike Oda's ending, I already know exactly how this argument ends.